Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Welcome to another one of my Am I a Chap watch series, in which a wonderful gentleman has sent me images of his watch collection with a commentary of the watches, how they came into his life, what they mean to him. And it helps us become a little inspired, maybe a little bit enlightened and educated to the watches that we will meet on our journey today with Reg. Now, Reg, I know, is a very well-dressed man. He's actually been on the Am I a Chap series before, but for his sartorial offering. And today he has sent me some amazing watches. I have to say, this is the most comprehensive list of watches and some of the nicest watches that we have ever seen on this series. And settle yourselves down, get a cup of tea. There are 10 watches here, I think, so we've got quite a journey to go on. So I'll get through the first one rather sharply because this is not an uncommon watch. As you can see, it is a Casio GShock. And Reg tells us that as a young lad, the only interests and knowledge that he had around watches was that his classmates wore Swatch wristwatches and his father wore a Rolex. And he said he really wanted a G-Shock because they appear indestructible, and he thinks that everybody should have a beta watch in their collection. Of course, you know, I would agree with that entirely. I've got a Casio watch which I give a good thrashing myself from time to time. So he tells me that he wears his G-Shock when he does any sports, any work around the yard, and whenever he needs to do something which may cause him to worry that his watch may get a knock or a bang. And I think this is a cracker. It's a lovely watch. This is one of the metallic Casio watches, a G-Shock. I know that they also do this in a sort of gold effect, PVD effect. And it takes the standard sort of black G-Shock, takes it to another level. And G-Shock is an interesting company itself. I mean, obviously it's part of the Casio conglomerate, and Casio emerged from the ashes of, post-war Tokyo, when a gentleman called Tadao Casio in 1946 founded his company. Now, Casio went on to become something of a major player in electronics. Started off doing other engineering works. I believe the first ever thing they produced was a smoking implement. But over time, they started making calculators and electronic musical instruments and so on. But then they started doing wristwatches. 1974, in fact, see them produce their first wristwatch. And it's since become synonymous really as a manufacturer of low cost yet very highly regarded wristwatches. And of course they include the the F91W in their collection, which is the most common wristwatch in the world. I think they make over 1 million of them a year. Now, G-Shock is an arm of Casio. They were initially, interesting story of how G-Shock came into being. 1981, they were conceptualized by a Casio engineer called Kiko Ibe. And he was walking down the street, bumped into somebody at a pedestrian crossing. The wristwatch on his wrist fell off his wrist and shattered on the floor. And it made him think, I can do something better than that. And hence, the journey to create the G-Shock watch was created. Now, he set it what do they call it? A triple 10 ideology around it. So the triple 10 should be, it should have a battery life of 10 years. It should be able to cope quite happily with being dropped 10 meters, and it should be water resistant to 10 bar or 100 meters. And all Casio G-Shocks comply with that ideology right up to the modern day. The model which Reg shows us here can be purchased today. It's in the catalogue for Casio even to this day, about £160. Nice classic look. I like it though. Takes the old G-Shock to something totally different. Now, moving on and swiftly upwards in the world of horology. This is a brand I've had my eye on for quite some time. Grand Seiko. GMT model, in fact. And as you can see, it's a real blinder of a booty, this one. So Reg tells us there is so much he loves and appreciates about Japanese culture, that they strive for unachievable perfection through dedication and repetition. After having the opportunity to travel to Japan for work and eventually on vacation, Grand Seiko was one of the first watches he acquired as he got really serious. And eventually, Grand Seiko, this was the model which entered his collection. So the GMT, he says, and I would agree with this entirely, I'm actually wearing a GMT watch myself. One of the most useful complications, especially for travellers, excuse me, the finishing on the Grand Seiko watch of all of their collection is maybe the feather in their cap, which draws many people to them. Not just their aesthetic, but their execution of that aesthetic. And it says the finishing on the dials is unrivaled at the price point, and I think, you know, we can agree with that. Their landmark Zaratsu polishing provides seemingly impossibly sharp edges on the ridges of both the surfaces of the case and the dial. And it is absolutely splendid. While most people set the GMT hand to London, Reg tells us that he sets his to Tokyo as a reminder of his experiences in Japan and the friends that he has made there. And I go along with that. I keep the last place I travelled to in anger was Philadelphia. So I keep my watch set to Philadelphia time, my GMT hand. And I often communicate with a friend there. So when I look at my watch, it reminds me of the time in Philadelphia. So I do the same as old Reggie. And that GMT, I mean, if you look at it, it is an absolute beauty, isn't it? You know, 39.5 millimeters is the case size. So it's a real classic spot in the case size. And, you know, it's I believe this is called the Elegance Mechanical Automatic 3-day GMT. And beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I particularly like the blued GMT hand, which is subtle, but, you know, perfect in its execution. Those simple baton markers on the hands, and of course you can see the GM time being kept by the smaller numbers just next to the baton markers. Really classic and elegant watch, very beautiful. Still in the Grand Seiko collection today, cost about £4,500 should you wish to buy one. I love the ivory dial, it just pops for me. Beautiful, one of the best ones in his collection. So, moving on. Reg is a man who likes to dress. We know that. He's a sartorial fellow. So here we see one of his other pieces. This is the Cartier Tank Solar Beat. So Reg tells us his affinity for Cartier watches stems primarily on two fronts. First, he believes that they are some of the best designs on the market, but even more so the history behind the first men's wristwatches that were created by Cartier in 1940 for aviation pioneer Alberto Santos Dumont, so that he didn't have to hold a pocket watch that would have detracted his attention whilst flying. Whilst not in the Santos Dumont line, this Cartier Tank Solar Beat is a descendant of the World War I combat vehicle inspired design, and it's a real beauty. I've always appreciated the Cartier Tank. It is one of my favourite watches. I have a leaning towards rectangular watches. I've tried on a GLC Reverso many times and thought, shall I buy one, shall I not? But here we see, you know, the Solar Beat, which is an interesting one, an interesting model within the Cartier family. Whilst this type of watch, the Tank, has been worn by the likes of, you know, Muhammad Ali famously, it's slim, yet still very elegant. Reg tells us he has replaced the leather strap with a sailcloth strap, which allows it to be worn in slightly less formal attire, which most of us do most of the time, let's be honest. And the interesting thing about the Solar Beat is that it has a rechargeable battery inside, which is charged by solar power. As we walk along, you know, the watch will be will attract the attention of ultraviolet rays, and the way that Cartier have done it is ingenious. The photovoltaic charging elements are only behind the black parts of the hands. Of the indices. So only those little pieces of black that you can see on the indices actually catch the sun and do the charging on the photovoltaic units. Absolutely wonderful. And it's got all the other classic things, of course. You know, it's got that spinel cabochon on the crown, which is such an expected thing you always see on the Cartier. And on Reg's model, you can see that on the number 7, part of the V for 5 on the number 7 is made up of the word Cartier. So little elements like that. Only been released in 2021, this model, and it's an absolute beauty. They say that the rechargeable battery, which keeps this thing going with the solar power, should only need to be changed every 16 years. So it's a buy, wear and forget watch. every 16 years you might need a new battery. There you go. Currently in the range, £3,150 British pounds. I think this is a really nice one. So moving on, something a little different, the Baltic MR01 Salmon. And a striking watch. I really like this watch. It is attractive, it's elegant, vintage inspired, absolutely. That salmon coloured dial, which to me looks a little copperish, which is all in its favour. It's a real beauty. And Reg tells us he'd always wanted a colour, salmon colour dial in his collection in a vintage design. And this small French brand is perfect. They outsource their material in order to offer a relatively low price but high value product. And Reg tells us he wears it as a daily casual model, perfect with shorts, chinos, jeans, even business casual. And I can agree, it looks very nice. It sports a quarter rotor on the back that adds to its simple and unassuming charm. I really like that one. I love the colour, actually. It's unusual. Got the Breguet indices. Very attractive. Now, the Baltic brand was founded by Etienne Malek in 2016. The name was chosen, Baltic, because it has meaning for him, because Malek's father came from Poland, and of course that's a Baltic state. So very nice. 36mm case, which really draws me to this fellow, because it's a really classically elegant size, and it allows it to be worn in more situations than these larger sports watches, which to my mind look a little clumsy. What else do we know about it? It's a Hangzhou Chinese movement inside, automatic movement, obviously, keeping the price point down. Price point €545. So not a bad little unit. 30 meters of water resistance, non-screw down crown, and 42 hours of power reserve. So not a bad yet elegant watch, I would say. I really am drawn to that one. I think it's the Breguet hands which work for me. So moving on and up in the world, the Lin Aviation Big Eye, a chronograph, something very nice. So Reg tells us this watch inspired by military aviation watches of the 1930s, and it has that look, doesn't it? Absolutely. It's set with minimal text and offset registers, so they're not all, equidistant. So while reading the time is legible and easy on the eyes, deciphering the chronograph information can sometimes be a little difficult. It's a solid piece which he often uses when cooking for the family. Obviously timing things, to an element of split-second precision. Or when he needs to throw on something that requires no adjustment at all. So it's nice and easy. It's a 41mm case. And Longines, great company, founded in 1832. Of course, no part of the Swatch Group, the huge conglomerate of wristwatch brands owned by the Swatch Group. I really like this one. I love the colour. I'm a sucker for blue dials, and this is a nice one. I like the sort of contrast with the brown leather strap. I can see why that would be a lovely little watch to wear on a sort of daily basis. About £3,000, still in the Longines collection today. And staying with Longines, this is one of their dress watches. Now, Reg admits here that he doesn't even know the model name of the watch, but he rarely wears it because it was given to him by his sister when his brother-in-law, sister's husband, tragically passed away right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic a number of years ago. He was also Reg's son's godfather, so he does allow his son to wear the watch on special occasions, and Reg will one day give the watch to his son when he graduates from school. And every time he sees it or even wears it himself, he's reminded of the preciousness of human life and that we must treasure every moment with our loved ones. Isn't that really the essence of a wristwatch? It's the accurate recording of time, and it reminds us time is finite. That ticking second hand reminds us that the time that we are allocated of life is ticking away, and it's absolutely mandated that we enjoy every moment. If we can, make every moment count, make it important. It looks to me, and I'm not a big sort of expert of the Longines brand, looks to me something like a heritage flagship model. They retail for about £2,000, still in the collection today. Classically elegant though, white dial, simple indices, little sort of triangular indices, dark hands which allow nice contrast, easy to see, and that's what I like to see on a dress watch. I'm going to guess that's 38 to 40 millimeters just by looking at it. So it would be a perfect dress watch for most situations, particularly with the black strap. Fit in perfectly with the suit perhaps. Dates on there as well at the 3 o'clock section, part of the dial. Lovely little watch. And it's not really about the watch, is it? It's about the memories, the history, the family association. But now we are moving into a real world of horology. Not that the others weren't wonderful watches, but now we are stepping into a different class. And here we see a Glashütte original Panomatic Luna. Now, I find these watches fascinating, watches which are non-symmetrical. They're not for everyone, and on first glance you think, how the hell do you tell the time with it and what's going on with the dial? But actually, Reg tells us that, as we've just mentioned, his son, this watch was released on his son's birth year. So it was a very sentimental watch for him to buy. The dial is asymmetrical, uses a classic golden ratio proportions. The large window date makes it easy to read, even with aging eyes, and that is good to see, actually. I do like large date windows. While the layout and finishing on the dial is amazing, it is arguably even more breathtaking when you look at the movement. Note the duplex swan neck and the hand-engraved balance bridge on the movement. While often compared to the Lange, or the Langenzona 1, because of the similar design, the relative value proportion for the Glashütte original version is incomparable. Of course, a Langenzona now up in stratospheric amounts of money, whereas Glashütte original, also a German brand of course, they seem relatively modest in price. Glashütte original, German manufacturer, maker of luxury watches, founded in 1994 by the privatization of a number of watch brands which were brought together and formed in a conglomerate. So interesting. They use their own movements, so they are a proprietary movement producer themselves, and they are currently owned by the Swatch Group also, so part of that conglomerate. And when you look at this dial, it is 40 millimeters, and you can see there's a lunar movement going on there, the second hand, the hour hand, the large date. It's got everything that you need. I like the moon phase. You don't see that so often these days. It used to be much more prevalent in wristwatches in the 90s, but it's an interesting feature which can actually be useful if you want to look up and wonder if the moon's going to be there. Classic proportions at 40 millimeters, a real booty. Around about £10,000 should you wish to buy one of these today. Okay, staying with the wonderful world of Glashütte original, and we have seen a CQ in the past. Panorama date here. So this is Reg's second Glashütte original, completely different animal to the first one that we saw, and he tells us it is, in his opinion, the best diver in this luxury segment. And I have heard other people say that they would much rather prefer a Glashütte original CQ than a Rolex Submariner. Unfortunately, Rolex seem to have the marketing upper hand. Less people by far are even conscious of Glashütte original. But this is a beauty. So whilst perhaps the looks of the watch can be somewhat subjective, the level and finishing and the quality of the movement in this CQ watch is unmatched by any diver at this price or even higher. That's absolutely true. And Reg will point out here, he'll never test the extremities of the performance of his watch. He'll probably never go deeper than the deepest depths of a swimming pool. But we know this baby is rated to 300 meters, and it's perfect, for real diving should you wish to do so. And yeah, a little bit large though, 43.2 millimeters. So you need to have something of a larger wrist, and Reg tells us he's blessed with such. So he's able to wear these watches, with gusto. And he says it's something of a chameleon in many respects. It can appear green or black under certain light conditions. And nothing felt better than wearing it while relaxing on a wooden boat with his wife. Absolutely. And when we look at the dial of this CQ, I think that is what attracts us. You've got the indices which are interspersed every other with baton hand markings. So it's a nicely symmetrical dial. As you see, you've got the domed crystal, which gives a bit of distortion, which is often seen as very attractive. The bezel, highly visible, yet not overpoweringly so. The date window there at the 4 o'clock area on the watch, a little bit larger than most date windows, which I love to see. I'm wearing a Rolex right now, which has a Cyclops date window, and unless you catch it just right, you really can't read the date rather well. With a larger date window, as a man with aging eyes also, I appreciate what Reg says. Lovely big hands on the CQ. Look at the size of the minute and the hour hands. There is no chance you're not going to see what the time is with a brief glance, or in the middle of the night with the luminescence, kicking out all that power. It's got 100 hours of power reserve as well, so it ticks away. It would cost £11,600 if you were to try and buy one of those today. So, moving on. Another exceptional watch from the Omega brand. And here we see the Aquaterra Seamaster World Timer. Now, prior to the pandemic, Reg tells us this was the first watch he had ever pre-ordered sight unseen when the piece was released. He was, and continues to be, mesmerised by the laser ablation technology applied to create the three-dimensional map of the Northern Hemisphere, which is seen on the dial. And it is striking when you look at it, no doubt about that. It is a work of art and one of the best watches in the Aquaterra collection. You can go in 24 directions from the North Pole into the 24 time zones represented by the cities which are visible on the dial. What a practical watch if you are a traveller or somebody who just enjoys horology art. He tells us that he remembers getting the call from his Omega authorised dealer that his watch had arrived, but the pandemic was already in place. So no one was allowed to go into any stores to pick things up. Everything was in a very strange situation. So he drove his car, rolled down the passenger window, and the sales agent, gently placed the box into the passenger seat with no pleasantries exchanged, and off he drove. So interesting way of taking a watch into your collection. You don't get a glass of champagne and a conversation like you would normally. He says that, Reg says, he stares at the cities on the dial for months, telling himself during the pandemic that one day he would be able to travel again and enjoy these places. And when the day came, 18 months later, this was the watch he took on a Christmas trip to Paris to celebrate the opening up of restrictions and travel being part of his life again. A beautiful watch. Omega, of course, very famous brand these days. They were founded in 1903 in Bienne in Switzerland, and they produced and provided watches for the British Royal Flying Corps in 1917 for combat units, and also the US Army also took up use of these watches. And of course, famously, they were provided as flight watches for NASA and have been worn, I believe, on every mission to the moon to this point, and especially on Apollo 11 in 1969. Absolute cracker. They also keep time for the Olympics since 1932, so good claim to fame. Again, part of the Swatch group, so Omega. But if you look at this watch though, forget everything about the history and the story. Look at the dial. Absorb the artwork which actually had to take place, the laser ablation technology which created the relief of the Northern Hemisphere in the centre of this watch. And actually, to look at it, it's easy to read and understand as well. So, absolute beauty. So, moving on. Another classic watch. The Zenith Chronometer Sport. Came out just a few years ago, 2021. 41mm case. Would cost you £9,700 if you were to purchase one. And what Reg tells us here is that people don't believe that he has no regrets in selling his Rolex watch. Indeed, the Zenith is often compared to the highly desirable Daytona for very obvious reasons. That Rolex Daytona, the unicorn of watches, they exist, but you never see them. Is that true about unicorns too? For obvious reasons. So when you look closer, you will see that the watch is, of course, it's not a dead ringer for the Daytona, because the sub-dials are different colours here, those tri-dials. It's a very beautiful watch in itself. But Reg decided to buy this watch not because it looked like a Rolex, but because it was a more contemporary version of the El Primero, which is, of course, a famous watch from the Zenith back catalogue. It is obviously a Zenith. It does in a way, you know, how do you describe this? Could you say that Rolex copied Zenith? Because in some respects, you know, Rolex were using Zenith movements for generations. So when people will throw this point, you know, Zenith have just copied the Daytona for this successful sort of route that they took to make that watch so popular, is it one brand copying the other or vice versa? It's very hard to say. Zenith, of course, is a luxury Swiss watchmaker, started in 1865 and is one of the oldest continually operating watch companies in the world. They kind of started the concept of in-house movements, and they sold their branded movement onto many other companies, not least of which were Rolex, of course. So they are very storied history. They have been purchased by another large watch conglomeration, LVMH, in 1999, and they joined the LVMH stable of watches like Tag Heuer and Hublot. But I think this is a real classic. Nice watch, 41mm case, and a nice classic sports watch. I think it's lovely. So, moving on. Now we're going into the world of horology in a serious way. The Chopard Luquatro. I've seen this watch before because I remember that Reg was wearing this when I reviewed his outfit for the Am I a Chap series for his clothing. And it's as stunning now as it was then. Is it not? Look upon this watch with eyes of wonder. This was Reg's first precious metal watch, and it's in white gold. He loves the manual wind movement on the watch. It is quite large, 43mm, but again, he, don't forget, has rather large wrists. The 4-barrel movement stores an astounding 8+ days of power reserve, which you can just see in the 12 o'clock area at the top of the dial. You can see how many days of power reserve are stored there, which makes it fascinating. And he says the winding of the watch is totally buttery and a joy to undertake. Now, he got the watch and took advantage of the opportunity to fit it with a new watch strap. He went to George Cleverly, the famous British bespoke shoemaker, who make a Russian reindeer shoe, and he ordered a watch strap from them made out of original Russian reindeer. That leather, which was located a number of years ago on a sunken ship off the coast of England, was raised, and that leather is now being used for the making of shoes and certain accessories. Chopard only make around 5,000 watches a year, so their LUC line is truly exclusive, yet lovely and discreet. Most people are not even going to look twice at this, even though it is absolutely exquisite in white gold. Around about £25,000 to pay for this one, so it's classic, good stuff. Chopard, again, another Swiss manufacturer, retailer of luxury watches, jewellery. Many times I've walked down New Bond Street in London, looked in the window of their store and salivated a little at the pieces in their window. Founded in 1860 by Louis Ulysses Chopard in Switzerland, and has been owned by the Schofield family of Germany since 1963. Best known for making high-quality Swiss watches and jewellery, clients have included Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and can't fault that one. That is beautiful. That classic white dial, the sub-hands giving you, all the information that you need. Very beautiful indeed. A little large for me at 43mm, but again, beautiful. Now the next watch we're going to explore is another piece of high horology. It's the Breguet Classique 7137. And Reg tells us, as he continued to dip his toe into the world of high horology, he wanted to acquire something special for his 50th birthday. And in order to do so, he had to sell off his Datejust to partly fund this baby, but just look what he bought. Look at this Breguet. The level of finishing on the dial is breathtaking. You can see I can count at least 3 different types of hand guilloching, which have been undertaken to present that beautiful dial to us, which of course tells us the time. It also gives us a moon phase. There's so much going on here. It's a lovely, lovely watch. 39mm, so not too large, but what an absolute blinder. And of course, Breguet, they have a legitimate claim to being the first producer of a wristwatch. I know there's a little bit of a friction going on there with Cartier, who also would claim the same. But Breguet say that they produced a wristwatch for the Queen of Naples in 1810, some considerable years before any previous claim to the wristwatch manufacturer. Now this piece, it's got a self-winding, extra thin movement with date, power reserve indicator, and the phases of the moon, all visible while glancing down. An absolute beauty. The dial is finished in gold, hand engraved on a rose engine. Sapphire caseback, water resistant up to 30 meters. It's a 39mm case, so it's a very classy piece indeed. Breguet watches have been owned by some of the great and the good of the passing of history, including the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, King George III, Queen Victoria, Alexander I of Russia, and Sir Winston Churchill himself. What a beauty. If you were to buy this watch today, £38,500. What a classic. So, how many more fantastic pieces can there be? Let's look at the Blancpain Villeray Quantième Complete. Big name for a very special watch. Now, Reg tells us two colours that he loves when mashed together are blue and rose gold. And this is his latest watch. The Villeray offers a complete annual calendar plus moon phase in an ergonomic 40mm case size. With most annual calendars and perpetual calendars, the designs are quite noisy and convoluted, but Blancpain offers not only easy to read information, but has a clever way to adjust all of the parameters of the watch using a special tool which they provide. On the underside of each lug, you can use your fingernail to pull a trigger which changes the day, date, month and moon phase. And this overcomes the complexity of, changing all of those elements, if you don't wear the watch and it runs down and you've got to reset them all. So nice and easy. And as Blancpain are often claimed to say, they are the first watch brand in history. Of course, founded by Jean-Jacques Blancpain in Villeray, Switzerland in 1735. It's the oldest registered watch brand in the world. These days, it is a subsidiary of the Swatch Group, like many of our friends here that we've met today. And it is a top-tier watch par excellence. Now, I love this watch. When you look at the deep blue dial and that rose gold, the indices, the hands, those contrast of colours, the information available on the dial. I'm a little partial to a moon phase myself. I absolutely love this one. £23,700 should you wish to buy one. And when I think people often think about Blancpain and they basically think of the 50 Fathoms dive watch, this is an absolute beauty. I really like it. So there we go. That was Reg's collection. And Reg rightly says here, I realise that many, if not all of my watches don't reflect the most desired brands or models that people often talk about. And that's the way that he prefers it. He says he wants his watches to reflect what I hope is a projection of his personality. Someone who appreciates history, art, technology and people. Much like the logos on clothes, I don't care for watches which attract undue attention. What an absolute fabulous ideology to live your life by, Reg. The watch collection continues to evolve as he ages and as tastes change, as they are wont to do. On the horizon, he is thinking about adding a Parmigiani Fleurier PF Minute Ratapante or something from Moser. Now, the Parmigiani Fleurier is the watch favoured by King Charles III, so it's got a good bit of heritage for a relatively young brand. And Moser, of course, another solid high horology brand. But when we look at the collection together, what would you choose as your favourite there? For me, the watch I would strap to my wrist if I had the pick of that bunch would be that Blancpain. I absolutely adore the colours, the proportions. It would be a tough toss-up, man, because that Chopard is also great. But then again, a daily wearer, can you really beat that Grand Seiko GMT? Oh, what a choice it must be for Reg every morning when looking down at this collection and he has to decide what to wear. Absolute beauties. Thank you, Reg, for sharing your collection and something of the stories behind your watches. classic, absolutely classic. You're such a lucky man. And what I also like to see here are the watches which are absent. There is no Rolex here. And as Reg says, you know, people have Rolex on the brain these last few years. I'm so glad that he has demonstrated to us taste in his watch collection. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Reg. So there we go. I hope you have enjoyed this Am I a Chap watch collection. If you have, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, click the subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, you can leave me a comment. You can send me an email. You can buy me a coffee, just a one-off thing, or you could even become a patron and benefit from the additional video content which I produce every week. And I know that Reg is, in fact, one of my patrons. So thank you, Reg. So until the next time, take care. Wear your watch, whatever it is, with pride and passion. And I will see you again very soon.